I'm the director of the Build Systems Engineering Group at VMware in the Cloud and Productivity Engineering Group.
Okay.
So, my team is responsible for, we're a DevOps group. And, we're responsible for the build software infrastructure, software stack, right, that most of the VMware teams, use to build and build their products. And the reason why we kind of have to exist, right, is when you look at VMware's products, the breadth and the depth, the range of technologies and stuff that are used, it's really hard for any one single build system that's off the shelf to deal with it. Everything from assembler language, they're literally sitting on the hardware, on top of the Intel chips, right? All the way up to Java, Scala, Python, Ruby, Groovy, you name it, right? And these build systems don't really know how to cope with all that well. So, especially when you think about how old the company is, people were working on this problem 10 years ago, right? So, the tools are obviously better today, but still. So, yeah, how do you express the dependencies? How do you cache the things for later reuse? How do you then pull it all together in a way that matches up with how the product should be built and linked and packaged and stuff.
Okay.
So yeah, that's all our software, and the back end is this monstrous job orchestration thing. 30,000 builds a day. A lot of these builds have hundreds of components that are being pulled together or higher, and some of these your typical component often is not small, right? I mean, some of them are, but usually we're not talking jars here. We're talking megabytes or gigabytes of stuff,
Right.
So yeah, and hundreds of these things or more, being yanked together and packaged. So
Okay.
pretty intense.
Well, right. So, and you have a presentation at SwampUp
Yeah.
about SaaS and on-premise,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So, what are some of the challenges in SaaS?
Well, speed, really. I mean, if the reason why this is a problem for us, why, we're starting to wrap our heads around it, is VMware for a long time, you've been very successful, we call on-prem, traditional, whatever word we're going to use for it, right? Software development company where we ship enterprise software. And people download it, install it when they want. Enterprise customers typically once a year. And, we typically release once a year. SaaS world is really different, right? Ideally you'd like to push code as soon as it's ready, and sort of the ideal SaaS pipeline is developer checks in code, it runs through a bunch of automated, builds and tests and stuff, and then 12, 24, 48, whatever many hours it is later, out it goes into production, right? Really, really different. Constantly titrating small changes as opposed to here's your next big thing, right?
Mhm.
And VMware, by 2020, a non-trivial amount of our revenue, has to be coming from SaaS, right? Because that's just it's the wave of the future. If we're not on that train, we're missing an opportunity.
Mhm.
So we're all in, and so that means the R&D teams are changing, which means that the teams like us that support the R&D teams, we have to change too, right? But the problem is, just because we're going all in on SaaS, we still have all these
On-premise.
on-prem enterprise customers who, they're there, they're great customers, and even if they all went to SaaS immediately, a lot of them, this concept of a support contract, right? There are people running vSphere 5, 4, whatever. Old releases, and some of them are still on support. So, yeah. So, that's one of the challenges, right? Is, okay, on-prem teams, there's support requirements. If there's a security issue, right, you've got to like Heartbleed, the recent ones, right? Spectre, Meltdown. Put the patches out, get them out as quickly as you can to all the affected releases. And some of these, some of these are maybe something you put out last week. Some of these are things you may have put out 3 years ago or more. right? Your typical VMware support contract is 7 years. A lot of customers will pay for more, or sometimes if it's like a major architectural shift between one release to another, we'll extend it ourselves just out of goodwill, because we know the transition from version N to N+1 is really hard, right? So when you're looking at that, you're going, well, 7 years in computer software is basically forever.
Yep.
Right. So you're looking at rebuilding, and you don't want to rebuild everything. You want to rebuild just the small amount of stuff that's necessary, so you don't have to worry about regressions or weird things happening and weird bugs creeping in. And you're talking about doing something using the environment and the tools and stuff that, like, well, maybe they're today's, but they better act like they did 7 years ago, or your thing won't build, right? And then what are you going to do? You're stuck. Right. And that's a problem the SaaS teams just don't have, because they care about, well, what's shipping tomorrow, right? And maybe, well, what did I ship last week, right? Because, maybe I'm doing a rolling upgrade in the cloud. And so, if there's a problem, maybe I have to patch something. But usually you don't patch the old stuff. Usually it's, well, just build the next thing and get it out there and roll your instances to the new version. So it's just something they don't care about. But, the on-prem teams do, and, we have to be able to support both. And for the teams that especially the ones that are converging, you see this more and more common, because if you're if you're a product team and you're supporting both SaaS and on-prem, right, you don't want two separate code bases, right? You want one, but you have to meet the compliance requirements of both.
That's right.
So how do you do this, safely, right? How, because development engineers, this is a lot of details they don't know about, they don't want to know about, they shouldn't have to know about, So, okay, how do you set things up so that they can do things fast, efficiently, as simple as possible, but, basically not mess it up, right, by accident. So, give them as much speed and everything as we can, while maintaining, allowing them to maintain the requirements around support, security, that stuff, that they need.
Right. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for giving us an idea of what to do with SaaS and on-premise when we deploy our software.
Yep.
So thank you so much.
You're quite welcome.